How do I know I'm a good fit for a franchise? Who is not a good fit for a franchise? What is the cost of my service? It's free. There's no catch. I only have $10,000 or $20,000 in savings. I always recommend speaking with a funding partner to look at all your funding options. What are the hottest franchises? And this is one of my favorite questions. And really, it comes down to it depends.
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast, where you can escape the corporate trap through franchise ownership. Here's your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, the Franchise Guide.
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Giuseppe Grammatico, your franchise guide, the show where we help corporate executives experience time and financial freedom via franchising. Thanks for joining us today. Today's topic, is kind of going back and forth what we've talked about and what we haven't in the past. And someone made a comment. I asked for their suggestion. I said, is there a show or a topic you'd like for me to cover? And they basically said, not necessarily, but you have close to 200 episodes, maybe revisiting certain areas. And this one individual had a lot of great questions. And I said, you know what, maybe just do a general kind of not getting into great detail, but almost like a frequently asked question episode, which I thought would be kind of cool, and just kind of go into kind of bullets, and then we can talk in more detail another, but kind of high end, especially for someone that maybe isn't ready or not certain where to start. And these are great things to kind of consider. And I know I'd find this valuable. Just let's answer those questions quickly. And then if I want to dive in later, we can do so. So as a reference point, we do have an FAQ page on our website. It's ggthefranchiseguide.com/FAQ. We'll link that in the episode. And, some of the questions and they're common questions. It wasn't just this one individual. So it's great to kind of revisit these and kind of, let's just rehash them and just kind of go through. So number one, how do I know I'm a good fit for a franchise? I think we did a show on this topic a while back. And really there are three things. And number one, are you okay with following a process? That would be the first one. Following a process and a proven system and model, because that's what a franchise is, right? It's a proven process and system. Number two, do you have money to invest? And keeping in mind that money could be cash, investments, retirement rollovers, equity in the home, et cetera, et cetera. So there are various ways of gaining access to capital, but you need some type of money, at bare minimum covering the franchise fee, or, putting your 20 or 30% down on an SBA loan. And then number three, this is more in line with looking at specific brands, but is your investment timeframe below 6 months, preferably, sooner than later? I would say if your timeframe is a couple of years out, probably doesn't make sense to look at a specific brand, as we won't know what territories or what availability, location, territory-wise for that specific brand, if that makes sense. So definitely you can research franchises, but definitely they know what's going to be available in the next couple of years. So that was a really important topic. And that the follow up to this would be, who is not a good fit for a franchise? And it's basically that you can't follow a system, probably not a good fit for a franchise, or you like the system but you want to change it, right? So you want to buy a fast food franchise and completely change the menu, probably not a good fit. You're not, don't have money to invest in the business, probably not a good fit, right? You need some capital to invest. There's definitely going to be a franchise fee. A startup, maybe less startup in the very beginning as far as investment, but it's probably going to take you a lot longer to get launched. So kind of what's the time value of money? What's your time worth, opportunity costs, and things like that. And if you have no time frame, if you're just kind of kicking tires, then probably not a good fit. The process is pretty straightforward with franchise. You can get all the information you need up front from the franchisor. You validate, talk to franchisees, and then you get invited to a discovery, meet the team day. And right after that event, if you're approved, they'll ask for a decision, since the franchise company will hold a territory or location for you. So kind of wanted to cover both sides to it if you weren't clear on one side versus the other. So who is a good fit and who is not a good fit? Another question I got was, what is the cost of my service? It's free. There's no catch. There is a time commitment. That's basically it. And I don't do this for free. We bill the franchise companies, pay us a referral fee in only if you end up buying a franchise, simply put. What other question do we get? Looking at my notes. Why do I wear a wired headset? Someone had just mentioned to me, and it's because my last headset was constantly getting disconnected. So I thought it was a funny question, and it's cheap. It's easily replaceable. Everything is wired. I have hard wiring Cat 5 and the mic here in this, because worst thing to do is, especially when we're going live, is to lose the connection. So there you go. That's why I wear a wired headset. So what else is there? Funding. I only have $10,000 or $20,000 in savings. I'm assuming I can't afford a franchise. Well, that decision on funding, I always recommend speaking with a funding partner to look at all your funding options. And, believe it or not, if it's coming from an old traditional IRA or a retirement account from a previous employer, you have access to that money. We had someone that had 20 or 30,000 in savings, and we found out they had about $250,000 in their retirement. They were able to do a retirement rollover if you're comfortable with that, and essentially utilizing your retirement assets to fund the business. So instead of investing in the mutual funds, which they were invested in, they're now investing in their franchise. So tons of funding options, SBA loans and retirement rollovers. We just had someone that's close to using the equity in their home, with the boom in the real estate market, utilizing some of the equity portfolio loans. I have not seen as popular, but taking a loan on your non-retirement investments, quick way to get, the money available to invest in the franchise. So funding was that, followed by, I don't have millions of dollars to invest in franchises. And that's because I think people, when they think of franchising, they think of fast food. And that's just simply not the case. I'm answering a few questions in one. There are, just say around 4,000 franchises in the US alone, 70 plus industries. So if you can think of a business, there's probably a franchise. So the investments, some investments do not require any brick and mortar. So there's no real estate. You can run it from home. I'm not saying your customers are coming to you, but you're offering a product or service where you're going directly to a customer. Maybe it's B2B. You're helping them reduce expenses. You're helping a customer with water and smoke mitigation after a flood, fire, or natural disaster. So you're essentially having staff that goes out, provide vehicles. At some point, you made an office or warehouse for these types of businesses, but in these $1 million investments that we hear about, typically that's you're getting into real estate, standalone buildings, and things like that. But there are many franchises that will have an all-in investment, which is really the franchise fee in the first 90 days, working capital, employee costs, marketing, training, legal, accounting, all that stuff for under $250, and in many cases under 100,000, depending on what the business is. If there's W-2 versus 1099 contractors, if there are vehicles and or equipment involved, these are all variables, and each franchise will provide you in item 7 that will break down kind of an itemized list of what their, all the expenses that you may incur, and they'll provide a low and a high end, for that investment. Someone asked me, and maybe they read somewhere in over the years, but can a franchisor take my franchise back? And I go, in a worst case scenario, possibly. And I think what they were getting at is, if I'm running a business, can the franchisor just take my business back? And the answer is not just for the hell of it. If in the event you are not following the system, you are not paying the royalty and things like that, and not meeting the requirements, if there's certain requirements in the business, they will let you know, typically informally, maybe a phone call. And then if it continues, maybe sending you a certified letter. But this is not something that should come as a surprise. There's going to be constant communication with the franchisor. Your business isn't just going to disappear overnight. So if there's any communication with the franchisor, I would highly recommend speaking with them and figuring out what the issue is. What are the hottest franchises? And this is one of my favorite questions, because I get this on the comments. I get this in an email, and a lot of people will download my book and ask the question. And really, it comes down to it depends. And I hate keep saying that, but I'll talk in more detail. The hot franchises. I always tell people, let's look for industries that have been popular, and that'll be the next one. But ultimately, what do you want this business to look like and located? So if a hot franchise happens to be in the fast food space and you're in New Jersey and it's sold out, well, it's completely irrelevant unless you're looking to move. If we're looking at the same business, it's a hot business and it's $1 million investment, and you have enough for maybe a $200,000 investment, it's irrelevant. It's something to maybe aim for down the road, assuming the franchise is still available. So there are a lot of factors, and I really feel that instead of going that route and then kind of what we call settle and basically say these are the hot franchises, it's double the investment, but I'll get outside investors. It's working nights and weekends, but I'll suck it up because it's the hot franchise. Now you start to settle, and now it's a business that you just don't have interest in. And although I'm not saying the business can't make money, where I question is it sustainable? How long are you going to be able to do this if it's really not the business, that you're looking for? So if you work in reverse and look at the characteristics of the business, I think that's going to be where you get more specific, and then you say, okay, I want it to be, under 5 employees, non-brick and mortar, under a couple 100,000, where I can open up and scale quickly. Now we're starting to narrow the search down and start looking at specific industries, which leads us into, a couple other things as far as what industries we've seen. So we're going to pause here. We're going to pick up in part 2, as we've had quite a few questions we'd like to get answered. So thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate the feedback, and we'll have a part 2 of our episode discussing frequently asked questions that we get on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn how to make the transition from corporate to owning your franchise, join Giuseppe on the next episode. You can also follow on all social media platforms and achieve financial and time freedom today.